Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Emily Hiles, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Corporal Hannah Probyn. At the outbreak of the Second World War, the British government did not have the resources to maintain the Royal Air Force for the impending air war in Europe. While factories could increase the production of aircraft, there was no such way to supply trained aircrew. A plan was proposed for the Dominions to establish a pool of trained aircrew to serve with the RAF. The proposal was accepted by the Australian War Cabinet, and after several weeks of negotiations in Canada, an agreement was signed on the 17th of December 1939. The scheme was known in Australia as the Empire Air Training Scheme. Under the Empire Air Training Scheme, Australia would provide about 28,000 aircrew over 3 years, a third of the total number of aircrew. Australia would conduct its own elementary training, while advanced training would be conducted in Canada because of its closeness to the British aircraft factories and the war zone. Royal Australian Air Force schools were established across Australia to support the Empire Air Training Scheme. While it was initially proposed that each country's aircrew would serve in distinct national squadrons, the bulk of Australian aircrew served with RAF squadrons. There were eventually 17 RAAF squadrons by the time the scheme effectively ended in October 1944. By this time, over 37,000 Australian airmen had been trained as part of the scheme. Today, we remember the formation of the Empire Air Training Scheme. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. This evening, we are honoured to acknowledge His Excellency Mr. Petr Pavel, President of the Czech Republic. Her Excellency Mrs. Jana Tyra, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Czech Republic to the Commonwealth of Australia and New Zealand. Professor Abdulrahim Dusak, Member of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey. His Excellency Ufuk Cezer, Ambassador of Turkey to Australia. Ministerial and parliamentary delegation for the Solomon Islands, accompanied by Admiral David Johnston, Chief of Defence Force. Commonwealth and Pacific Island nation representatives attending the 2024 Commonwealth Procurement and Contract Management Conference and their accompanying delegations. We also warmly welcome Air Commodore Peter McDermott, retired, representing the Air Force Association, and Mr. Patrick Delgaitis, Deputy President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Fern Bay Public School, Fern Bay, New South Wales, and Islington Public School, Islington, New South Wales. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in
Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Oswald Mountford. Oswald was born on the 11th of December 1923 in Leeton, New South Wales. His parents were Oswald Sr. and Ivy Mountford. Known as Billy, he grew up in Leeton with his younger sister Patricia. After attending Leeton Intermediate High School, Oswald Mountford got a job in the public service as a clerk in the Under-Secretary's Department in Sydney. When war broke out in 1939 September, Mountford was not yet 16, so his enlistment was delayed for a few years, until on the 23rd of May 1942, he joined the Royal Australian Air Force in Sydney. Designated aircrew, Mountford began training at a number of locations around Australia before he was sent to Canada in July 1943 for further training under the Empire Air Training Scheme. In Canada, Mountford trained as an aircraft navigator and by April 1943 had gained his Air Observer's badge. During his training, he paired up with fellow Leeton man Edward Wickie, who had joined up with him in Sydney at the same time. The pair would fly together from then on. They arrived in the UK in November 1943. Further operational training followed before Mountford and Edward were posted to their first operational squadron, number 464 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force, in early July 1944. Both were discharged from the RAF after they were granted commissions as pilot officers in the Royal Air Force. They joined their new squadron, flying de Havilland Mosquito aircraft during their busiest time of the war, around D-Day. They soon racked up numerous missions, attacking a variety of enemy targets in France and Holland by day and at night. In early October, Mountford and Wickie had the honour of flying the squadron's 1000th sortie since the June 6 D-Day invasion, and were presented with a commemorative plaque in recognition. By early 1945, the war seemed to be in its final phase as Allied forces closed in on Germany, but flying operations continued apace. On the night of the 3rd of February 1945, Wickie and Mountford took off from their airbase on Thorney Island, east of Portsmouth. After successfully attacking enemy installations in Holland, they were returning to base at around 2 a.m. in bad weather and low cloud. As they neared the airfield, the village of Horndean suddenly loomed large in the windscreen. Taking immediate evasive action to avoid crashing into the houses, Wickie tried to pull up. Instead, the plane clipped a parish hall and a house on some high ground, and the Mosquito crashed just outside Horndean with a loud bang. Thankfully, no civilians were hurt, but both Wickie and Mountford were dead. They had bailed out at the last moment and had struck trees before their parachutes could properly open. Oswald Mountford was 21 years old. He and Edward Wickie are buried at Brookwood Military Cemetery in Surrey. In 2019, a local group erected a memorial to the two men near the crash site. The group was led by some who had been children billeted at Horndean in 1945 and remembered the terrible event. Mountford is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Pilot Officer Oswald Mountford, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.